Good morning. I hope everybody had a very good long weekend, and I hope your candidates won. If not, okay, let's just pray more. Anyway, before I start, let me introduce myself. I'm Sheryl Pura. I'm architect by profession, but I'm a workplace strategist. Later on, you'll understand why I said that's my title. But do me a little favor and take a quick look at the person next to you and try to guess how old they are. And please, keep it to yourselves. Keep it to yourselves, especially if you're sitting next to a lady. Okay, you'll realize later that's very important why I asked you that question. 4 years ago, I'm still living and working in Singapore, doing a lot of hospitality projects there. And then I received an offer to lead a team of workplace designers here in Manila. And in my head, how come these people who are specializing in corporate design are asking me to lead their team? Because, as you know very well, hotel designs and corporate designs are at the end of the design spectrum. While hotel design is mainly about experience and emotions, you have this corporate design which is mainly about efficiency and practicality. And I realized that my now bosses, who are offering the job to me then, I think that they must be smoking something. And whatever that is, I want some of it. So long story short, I joined Goudie Associates since then, and then it's only then that I realized what an important thing it is for them to help companies engage their employees and make sure that their staff is on their peak potential while in their workplace. And even if Goudie Associates is nowhere related to Catalan architect Antonio Gaudí, we do help a lot of these famous companies create workplaces for their employees. So much so, for the last 30 years, we have seen these companies from their first office here in the Philippines or in our regional counterparts in Hong Kong to their renovations and even relocations. Over the last few years, we have seen a lot of things, and we have seen transformation after transformation. But only this last few years, I would say that last 3 to 5 years, that we have seen really drastic transformation in the workplace. At first, we thought that this has been brought about by the Google phenomenon, the statement offices of the tech startups. But we have seen workplaces like this, overly siloed, very hierarchical, rigid, and solitary. Just by looking at the picture, you would know who the manager is, who the staff is, but you won't know who they are because you don't get to see each other. And then workplaces starts to look like this. It's young, it's colorful, and even personal. I refuse to believe that this is a trend. No, because sometimes they say, Pinoys, when they see one thing, they would want it for themselves. But we start to dig deeper on what causes this phenomenon in the workplace. So what are the drivers for this workplace? Many would say that it's the lack of real estate, hence the rising cost of it, or new technology, the cultural shift in the workforce, or the emergence of new economies. But after all of this, it really just boils down to 2 key factors. One of which is technology. We cannot deny that technology have changed how we live, how we work, how we communicate. We have at least 3 devices that we work with, right? And actually, this technology have enabled us to do work at our convenience, at our own time, at our own place, and in our freedom. That's why in PayPal study, they have found out that 1 in every 5 working individuals will be freelancing by 2020, and that's already next year. So you can just imagine the prevalence of the gig economy, as we call it today in the Philippines. That's why spaces like My Town, WeWork, Spaces really thrive in this environment here in the Philippines. The second driver of this transformation are the generations. It is a driver, and also what it does is it magnified the effect of technology in the workplace. And I'm not even talking about the millennials. I'm talking about the new generations. And what's interesting about this new generation is that they have the ability to connect to the different generations. Now, take a quick look again to the person seated next to you and try to guess to which group they belong to. So we have the boomers, the baby boomers, as we call them. These are actually my bosses. They're not here, so I could say that. Okay. So they're the ones who equate professional success to self-fulfillment. Hence, they have the private offices. When I do these presentations and I try to explain to a lot of executives the challenges of transformation, I would usually tell them that we have 3 problems here. It's called KKK. Anybody know what KKK is? When you reach a certain stature, you will need 3 Ks. Kwarta, kotse, kwarto. To translate that in English, you need money, a car, and a room. And in real estate, room is a prime lot, so they say. Then comes the Generation X. That's kind of me, Generation X. So we advocate the open office plan. We're not really into collaboration, but we would like to see our colleagues face-to-face, hence the open office plan. And then the generation which kind of disrupts everything for the last 10 to 15 years, the millennials. So the millennials are the advocate of the activity-based working. They are somehow the proponents of the co-working spaces because they use the space based on their activity. That's how it works for the millennials. But again, I think when I speak to a lot of executives or a lot of companies who are trying to do transformation in their office, and I would often hear them saying that they would want to create a workplace for their millennial staff, for the new generation, the millennials. And I always fight my desire to correct them that perhaps you might be neglecting somebody, the new generation. And it's really important to consider them, especially that Philippines have entered its demographic sweet spot. So what does this mean, the demographic sweet spot? Basically, it is a reverse of roles in the family where you have a younger workforce and a vibrant workforce. Say, for example, for a family of 5, where in the previous generation, you have the father working for the entire brood of 5. Now you have 3 working children to sustain a family of 5. So you have more financial power within the company, and of course, more workforce. So who is this Generation Z? Anybody here 24 years old and below? Wow, there's 1. 2. I hope you're not lying, huh? 3. Okay, so they are the Gen Z, and we have to understand who they are and what they are. They are very much similar to their predecessors, the Gen Y, the Millennials, but of course, distinctly different. While the Millennials and the Gen X still are very technologically adept, we use technology easily, we adapt to it, but the Gen Z is the true digital natives. They were born with technology. They cannot remember a time when cell phone doesn't exist. I bet they don't know the sound of a dial-up internet. And the other characteristic of them is that they are very entrepreneurial. Yes, millennials are also entrepreneurial, but the key difference is that they're also very pragmatic. Because they have lived with parents, the Gen X or the boomers, and they have seen their parents suffer through some financial crisis, after financial crisis, and then in their heads, Yes, I want to earn, but I also have to be practical. Unlike their predecessors, the millennials, who are living in a dream world where for them that meaning is the new money. Well, not so much for the Generation Z. But having said that, it is also important to note that Gen Z are very socially aware because they have been born in a world where terrorism, where sustainability is a key factor, climate change, cultural diversity are very much of a thing now in our world. So they tend to choose a workplace which has social commitments and really advocates and practices it. For them, for the Gen Z, and today, their main reason to choose a workplace is based on the company culture and the workplace character. And that I cannot stress much enough. Perhaps you have heard of an agile workplace. Basically, an agile workplace is pretty much what the millennials have advocated. So it is based on activity, on where they would want to work, based on the task at hand. But you see, for now, it wouldn't be enough that your workplace is just agile. To fully harness the capacity of technology and the dynamics of this generation, the workplace has to be kinetic. And by kinetic, we mean that as when the company grows, your space grows. As it contracts, it contracts. As the company builds new businesses, it shifts. All of these things while keeping the same real estate. And that is the challenge now for us workplace designers. How can we maximize the real estate of each company? And so we employ the strategy of memo. We have found out that in the last 36 months, and we did several projects for companies who are trying to transform their workplace, this is one strategy that we have found very much efficient. So memo has two aspects to it. Maker environment and mobile occupants. Let's talk about the maker environment. As I have mentioned, and that the workplace character is very much of an importance to the new generation and to the diverse workforce. It is not enough to design a workplace which is just efficient and practical. You know, people just want to create spaces, they would want to experience it. They demand a richer experience in the workplace. They want to experience themselves in the workplace. That's why we have to incorporate hospitality sensibilities into the design together with the practicalities of a workplace. That is the marriage between the two, and come there, baby, corporatality design. And this has proven to be very much effective in such that we create experiences for all of the workers, depending on how they would want to experience the space versus on how they would want to use the space. Because sometimes working is not really just doing. Working is pretty much thinking as well. It's creating, it's socializing, it's being with your colleagues. It's an entirety of an activity. And as the previous speaker have pointed out, we practically spend the entire day at work. So we have used the sensibilities of the hospitality industries to create social spaces. Gone are the days where you have closed pantries. Now our pantries are within the open office area. Sometimes even once you walk in to the main door of the office, you would see what we call the plaza. So while pantries are just being used during lunch or breakfast, you would see the plaza very abuzz throughout the day because people work here. People would just meet their clients here sometimes, depending on their judgment if they're informal, or external visitors. So this has become a multi-purpose space. And this has become their space to connect with each other as well. The second zone that we created, of course, is the personal zone because, hey, you still have to work, right? So you would have sometimes a desk. I say sometimes because desks now could be either assigned or not assigned, as long as you have a surface to work on. The image at the right is my favorite space. I call it focus spot, but really it's for power napping. And then you have also focus rooms, only good for 2 to 3, just to do your focus work. And then you have learning space. Well, learning spaces are basically training spaces or innovation rooms, we call sometimes, and even war rooms. And aside from the benefit that it has, or it gives the company the convenience of having their training room, it also saves them money. Because usually, companies would rent out other venues to do their workshop, to do their trainings, but now they have the ability to use their own workspace. And since these are very flexible spaces, it could be anything. Well, training rooms now is not just a formal sit-down training. You could also have an informal training, depending again to the audience and depending on the content of your training. The last zone is perhaps the most important zone, which is the co-creation zone. It is the collaboration zones, which is peppered throughout the open office space. It is composed of enclosed meeting rooms, both formal and informal, huddle spaces within the open office space. And you know what they say? 1 + 1 = 3. When 2 ideas meet, comes a baby, a better one. That's why it's so important for companies now to have a lot of co-creation space. Because any idea could strike you at any time of the day, and you have to have a space for that. And so by doing all of this, we create what we call infinite spaces. Spaces which are multifunctional, it's also a multi-sensory space, depends on how you would want to experience work at a certain time, depends on your work cycle during the day. Take, for example, this one. We made it for Film Life. These are their new regional offices. It's called Genesis or a Rebirth. It is a training room which is directly connected to the workspace. In just a matter of minutes, it becomes a social hub. So they do their parties here. They do not rent out anymore for gatherings or for large activities. They use the same space. And it's just a matter of minutes to transform this space. Another good example that we started to employ for the last few projects that we have is what we call the innovation room. This is a very interesting room because I call it the room of what-ifs. This is a creation room where anybody from a rank and file up to the president could be in this room, just tear down the barrier between their status and then just easily collaborate with each other, their ideas, very fluid. And the most interesting comment that we got from this room is that they made it feel more human. Because since all the barriers are down based on the design of the room, they feel more connected and they feel more human. It's kind of weird to get that comment from a workplace scenario. But when we heard that, we started to employ this kind of design and this kind of strategy for many of the workplaces that we had in the last several projects. And we had huge success for this one. They test gadgets here, they test their new technologies here. If this is Sun Life's innovation room, so they test their app here. And they have some sort of mirror, a one-way mirror there, which reads the facial reaction of the one testing the device. So they get a natural reaction, an adulterated reaction to the app that they are trying. The second aspect of the memo strategy is mobile occupants. This is somehow, I'm not sure if a lot of you are aware how agile you work and how technology enabled us to do that. I myself can work anywhere, but I'm still a regular employee under a company. So we begin to identify and even challenge the types of workers, because some are even in denial on how much they use the workplace. First is that we have the fixed workers, what we call the fixed workers. These are your admins, your finance, your treasury, people who had to be in the same desk at all times. So they are what I call the desk huggers. They have to have their fixed assigned desks. And then you have the flex. These people would still have to have a desk, but they're highly collaborative. So more often than not, there are internal meetings or even external meetings for that matter. And then we have the fluid. These are your marketing or sales staff or even executives who just drop by the office to report or to do some things and then just go off, to sell and also to network. So they're very highly collaborative group of workers. Perhaps the greatest, not the greatest, of course, but one of the most successful projects that we have is Sun Life. This is a case study, and this is an applied design already. Well, Sun Life have projected to outgrow their facility in BGC for the next 10 years. And that is a facility that they own. So you can just imagine the costs running in their heads once they build a new facility just to house the growth that they have projected. And so what we did, we challenged and studied the different demographics of their companies and identified their mobile occupants and how they are grouped. And then after that, we have done several change management transformation programs which involves the stakeholders and then introduce them to alternative ways of working. We are banking, and we have proved to be successful to the fact that they are starting to adapt to this new workplace. Hence, we were able to design the entire facility to be enough for their 10-year growth. Actually, for me, this is more of a success than the award it has given with for the last Herman Miller Livable Office Awards. After all this, I realized that perhaps this era of designing workplaces has come to an end. And we should be designing for places that work. Thank you.